This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Hello, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world, happenings in politics, happenings in technology, science, the environment, entertainment, all of these things, and we take a look at them from a higher perspective. And often I'm asked, well, what exactly do you mean by a higher perspective? And by that higher perspective, I'm talking about a transcendence point of view. Looking at what is around us, what is going on from I don't want to say neutral, but from a position where you have pretty much two understandings. One is that this is a creation. Two is that you are creating it. And you are creating it to have an experience of something. And to sort of transcend our immediate ego response to a situation or to perhaps a news story or whatever's going on in the world, that feeling you have when you hear something on the radio or you see the latest things going on from maybe the White House or things going on in the world, or political turmoil, or shootings, or terrorist attacks, or what have you, and you just want to scream, and you feel like the world is tearing itself apart. That's an immediate ego response. And believe me, everyone has them. And there's a very good reason why, because they are being manipulated by the very media that present us these stories. They want that reaction. They skillfully write and edit and create video and other media that are designed to elicit that kind of immediate ego response. Which makes, of course, rising above that, transcending that, all the harder. These people know what they're doing. But we can. And we do so, I believe, in one very particular way. I know those of us who are perhaps a spiritual mindset, or believe they are on some sort of spiritual path, and find that media tends to be very disturbing to peace of mind. Often the thought is, well, we'll just disconnect from that. We'll just turn off all the media and not interact with it. And I certainly, support that approach. I think that a significant portion of anyone's day or week should be spent, away from those sorts of things. But unless you're willing to move to a mountaintop, you're going to be interacting with these things. So rather than disconnect from it altogether, I think you get more from it when you go into it. When you go into it and you let those feelings, whatever they are, those ego buttons that are pushed, rise up. And you recognize, and just perhaps at the point of maximum discomfort, you recognize what this is. You recognize this as an illusion. You recognize this as something created on a higher level, I say, by ourselves at the level of what I call divine mind. But also, it's also part of a illusion loop that's recreated and continued by skillful media folks who aren't doing this, by the way, out of any meanness. They are not, we're going to get them this time. They're doing it because they honestly believe that this is the way that you present information to people. And this is the way that they're required to do their job, and they believe that they are doing a good job, and they are doing good things for people. They don't understand the manipulative side of it, or perhaps they do, but they're at peace with it because they feel like it gets the information out there. It gets people's attention. But in any case, it's up to us then to be able to go into that, recognize it for what it is, and the minute we do that, we begin to rise above it, and we begin to look at it differently. We begin to look at these things, all of them, as counterintuitive as it might seem at first. All of them are gifts. They are gifts to us, provided by us, to help us understand more about who we really are, why we're here, where we came from, and ultimately where we're going. To help us expand into being more of the truth of who we are on this level of sort of, I'll call it ego dynamics. And so that is what I mean when I say from a higher perspective. I know that's a long-winded explanation, but I'm asked it so often, and it strikes people as so curious that I feel like I have to give that sort of explanation. I try to shorten it at the beginning of each show, but I know there's always new listeners coming in, so I'd like them to understand what I mean by that approach. And of course, as always, as I tell you almost every week, this is not a religious show. It is not adherent to any particular religious beliefs, although we do discuss religion quite frequently, all kinds of religions, and their effects on us, and how they shape us, and what they can do. Perhaps the biggest emphasis is, or the biggest idea that I talk about in regards to religion, besides showing where religions came from and how they do come from our spiritual nature, is the fact that organized religions tend to be, or can be, religions in general can be at odds with spirituality, and that spirituality and religious belief are not the same thing, and in fact are often at odds with each other. But that's an ongoing discussion that I'm not going to get into at the moment because we have an awful lot to talk about. I'm excited about this show, this particular episode. I feel like it's going to be a really interesting one because we are talking about changing minds. And when I talk about changing minds, the title, just like a mystical experience, or even an acid trip, it has levels of meaning, both lower and higher. And that's why I kind of like that title. Changing minds. Now, the phrase itself, if you think about it, changing minds, can be the act of actively trying to persuade another person to think differently about a situation. Changing minds can also be a state where around us we are seeing changing minds, minds evolving and growing. So it has a variety of different meanings, um, which I will be touching upon in all different aspects. But let's just look at one aspect of it: changing minds. Can you really change a mind? Uh, much has been made lately in the environment in which we're in that says that people kind of hear what they want to hear, and that despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, people often believe things that they are presented with facts that contradict. And lots of this discussion centers around politics and our president, and the idea that somehow, and there's truth to it, by the way, that people are in their bubbles, perhaps when they have beliefs that are considered to be progressive or liberal, and those that have beliefs that are conservative, that people are in their own sort of echo chamber, hearing what they want to hear, thinking what they want to think, regardless. And that our president, Trump, is much like that himself. And there's some interesting stories that seem to support that idea. The headline today is that, as you may recall, the president had a summit with Kim Jong-un of North Korea on June 12th, and in which he has now said that there is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea, and he was very exuberant and excited about his meeting with Kim Jong-un, and had really nice things to say about Kim, and that they had made this agreement to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. And that because of this, he had such a great success in Pyongyang, there is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. And the headline today is that U.S. intelligence officials, citing newly obtained evidence, have concluded that North Korea does not intend to fully surrender its nuclear stockpile. Instead, is considering ways to conceal the number of weapons it has and secret production facilities. This evidence was collected in the wake of that summit in Singapore, and points to preparations to deceive the United States about the number of nuclear warheads in North Korea's arsenal, as well as the existence of undisclosed facilities used to make fissile material for nuclear bombs. In fact, whatever so-called agreement that Mr. Trump made with Kim Jong-un, there's no commitment from North Korea to really do any of these things or anything at all. And yet, his perception of that is, the threat is over and he won. Interesting. Much has been made of